A gold signet ring hit the hospital floor with a sharp metallic crack, spinning once, twice, before settling beneath a flickering fluorescent light. No one picked it up. Not the security guard frozen behind the desk. Not the intern clutching a clipboard like it might save his life. Not even the two men in tailored black coats who had just dragged a bleeding body through the automatic doors like they owned the building. Because everyone in that room understood one thing instantly. That ring didn't belong to a man you helped. It belonged to a man you survived. The glass doors slid shut behind them with a hollow hiss, sealing the emergency room in a suffocating silence that pressed against the walls. No sirens. No paramedics. No frantic shouting of vitals. Just the slow, deliberate echo of expensive shoes stepping across cheap linoleum, stained now with a thin trail of blood. He didn't stumble. Even half-conscious, even bleeding through a dark wool coat that probably cost more than everyone's monthly salary combined. He walked. Or rather, he allowed himself to be supported. There was a difference. Maeve Callahan noticed it immediately. She stood behind the nurse's station, a half-empty cup of cold coffee resting beside a glowing monitor. Her eyes lifted, not wide, not startled, just attentive. Clinical. The kind of calm that didn't come from ignorance. The kind that came from having seen worse. 3:12 a.m. The dead hour. When chaos usually slowed down just enough to breathe. Until it didn't. We need a room. The voice cut through the silence like a blade. Not loud. Not rushed. Controlled. Commanding. One of the men stepped forward, broad-shouldered, his presence filling the space before he even spoke again. Now. Not a request. Never a request. Maeve didn't look at his face first. She looked at his hands. Then his jacket. Then, the unmistakable outline beneath it. Gun. Of course. Her gaze shifted, finally, to the man between them. Tall. Lean. Head slightly bowed, but when he lifted it, the room changed. Dark eyes. Heavy. Focused. Not searching. Choosing. They landed on her. And stayed there. No words. No gestures. Just a look that carried something far more dangerous than panic. Expectation. Fix me. Or else. Around her, everything faltered. The intern took a step back. The security guards suddenly found the floor fascinating. Even the overhead lights seemed to hum louder, like they were aware something had just shifted. Power had entered the room, and it wasn't asking permission. Maeve set her coffee down. Slowly. Deliberately. Not because she was afraid, but because precision mattered. Trauma Bay 2, she said, her voice steady, cutting clean through the tension. Get him on the bed. For a fraction of a second. No one moved. Not because they didn't hear her, but because they were trying to understand why she wasn't afraid. Then, he spoke. Do as she says. Low. Calm. Absolute. The effect was immediate. The men obeyed. And just like that, control shifted. Not completely. Not yet. But enough to matter. Maeve stepped forward, snapping on a pair of gloves as she moved. Her focus already narrowing, sharpening, locking onto the problem in front of her. Blood loss. Posture. Breathing pattern. Details. Always details. Up close, the damage was worse. The coat was soaked through. The cut beneath, deep. Clean. Intentional. Not an accident. Not random. Someone had meant to do this. Maeve reached for the trauma shears without hesitation. I'm cutting this, she said. She didn't wait for permission. Because she already knew. Men like him didn't give it. The fabric gave way with a soft, expensive tear. And beneath it, violence revealed itself. But he didn't react. Didn't flinch. Didn't even tighten his jaw. He just watched her. Studied her. Like she was the anomaly. Like she was the only variable he hadn't accounted for. You're not shaking, he said quietly. Maeve didn't look up. Neither are you. A pause. Then, the faintest shift in the air. Interest. Something dangerous, sharpening. Because in a room full of people who feared him, she didn't. And that was the first mistake either of them made. The bleeding slowed under Maeve's hands. Not because the wound wasn't severe, but because she refused to let it be. Hold still, she said, pressing sterile gauze firmly against his side. Her tone clipped, efficient. Not soft. Not reassuring. Just certain. Most patients talked. They groaned. Complained. Asked questions they didn't really want answers to. He didn't. Declan O'Rourke watched her instead. Every movement. Every decision. The way she shifted her weight to maintain pressure. The way her fingers adjusted instinctively, not hesitating, not second-guessing. Experience. Real experience. Not textbook. Name, she said, still not looking at him. Declan. A beat. Declan what? His eyes held hers now. Just Declan. Maeve exhaled lightly through her nose, unimpressed. Right. Of course. She reached for antiseptic, tearing it open with her teeth before applying it to the wound. The reaction should have been immediate. Pain. Tension. Anything. But Declan didn't move. Didn't even blink. Maeve noticed. Of course she did. Either you've got an unusually high pain tolerance, she said flatly, or you're used to this. A flicker of something crossed his expression. Not offense. Recognition. I manage. Clearly. She injected the local anesthetic with steady precision. Little pinch. The words were automatic. Routine. But nothing about this was routine. The room remained quiet. Too quiet. Connor Flynn stood near the door, arms folded, eyes constantly scanning. Every sound outside the room registered. Every movement. Patrick Doyle lingered just behind him, still, observant, but not tense. That difference. Maeve clocked it without looking. She always did. Her focus returned to the wound. Deep laceration. Clean edges. Blade work. Professional. You were lucky, she said, reaching for sutures. Half an inch deeper, you'd be in surgery. Declan's voice came low. That wasn't luck. Her hand paused for the smallest fraction of a second, then resumed. Thread through skin. Pull. Tighten. Precise. You turned into it, she said quietly. Not a question. A conclusion. Silence. But not empty. Waited. Because she was right. Declan's gaze sharpened, something darker settling behind his eyes. You notice a lot. Maeve tied the stitch cleanly, moving to the next without hesitation. It's my job. No, he said. And this time, there was something deliberate in his tone. You notice things most people ignore. Now she looked at him. Finally, hazel eyes meeting his without hesitation. Without fear. Most people panic, she said. It makes them blind. Another stitch. Another pull. Perfect spacing. Declan leaned back slightly, studying her like a problem he hadn't solved yet. You didn't. Maeve's lips pressed into a thin line. I don't get paid to panic. A pause. Then, something shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. Interest had turned into something else. Something sharper. Because for the first time in a very long time, Declan O'Rourke wasn't the most dangerous person in the room. And he knew it. By the time Maeve tied the final stitch, the room felt different. Quieter. Not because the danger had passed, but because it had settled. Contained, for now. Keep it clean. No strain. You'll need antibiotics, she said, peeling off her gloves and dropping them into the bin. And you'll come back in 10 days. A beat, she added, almost under her breath. Though I doubt you use front doors. The corner of Declan's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Recognition. Connor stepped forward immediately, draping a heavy coat over Declan's shoulders like armor being restored. We're done here, he said. Maeve didn't move. Didn't step aside. Didn't look at Connor. She looked at Declan. You're not cleared. Connor's hand shifted, subtle, but deliberate, toward his jacket. Maeve noticed. Ignored it. If he leaves now without proper monitoring, he risks reopening the wound. She continued, voice level. Internal bleeding. Infection. Patrick let out a quiet breath behind them. Tension tightened. Then, Declan lifted a hand. Connor stopped instantly. Silence snapped back into place. Declan stepped closer. Too close. Close enough that Maeve could feel the heat of him, the faint scent of iron, and something darker beneath it. Expensive. Controlled. Dangerous. You talk to everyone like this? He asked. Maeve didn't step back. No, she said. Just the ones who think they're invincible. Another pause. Longer this time. Because she hadn't just challenged him. She'd reduced him. Turned him into a patient. A variable. Something to manage. Declan reached into his coat pocket. Pulled out a thick band of cash. Dropped it onto the metal tray beside her. The sound was heavy. Final. For the hospital, he said. Maeve's eyes flicked to it. Then back to him. I don't take money from patients. It's not for you. It never is. The words landed harder than expected. Because she wasn't impressed. Not by money. Not by power. Not by him. And that was new. Declan studied her in silence. Not her face. Not just that. Her posture. Her stillness. The way she held eye contact like it wasn't something earned, but something assumed. In his world, people reacted in patterns. Fear. Submission. Defiance. She wasn't any of them. She was unaffected. and that made her dangerous. You're different, he said quietly. Maeve exhaled, already turning away. I'm busy. Dismissal. Clean. Effortless. Like he didn't matter. Connor stiffened. Patrick's eyes flickered. But Declan didn't move. Because something had already happened. Something small. Invisible. Irreversible. A decision. Not spoken. Not explained. But locked in. He watched her walk away. Watched the way she didn't look back. Didn't hesitate. Didn't care. And in that moment, Declan O'Rourke did something he almost never did. He fixated. Not on the woman. On the anomaly. On the problem. On the one thing in the room he didn't control. Connor, he said quietly. Yes, boss. Declan's gaze didn't leave the hallway she'd disappeared into. Find out who she is. A pause. Then, colder. I want everything. And just like that, Maeve Callahan stopped being a stranger and became a target. 3 days later, Maeve almost convinced herself it was over. The night shift had swallowed the memory like it did everything else. Blood washed away. Floors sanitized. Faces forgotten. That was the rule. What happened in the ER stayed in the ER. Until it didn't. Hey, it's already paid for. Maeve looked up. The barista, Toby, wasn't smiling like he usually did. His voice was tighter. Careful. What is, she asked. He nodded toward the register. Your order. The guy outside covered it. Maeve's fingers paused on her card. I don't have a tab. I know. Something in his tone made her turn. Slowly. Deliberately. Through the glass window. She saw it. Matte black. Engine running. Parked like it didn't care about rules. The same SUV. The same presence. Waiting. A cold, familiar weight settled in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. By the time she stepped outside, it was gone. No screeching tires. No rush. Just gone. Like it had only been there to be seen. Underscore. The hospital didn't feel the same either. Too quiet. Too aware. Maeve swiped her badge, stepping into the locker room. But before she could even open her locker, the intercom cracked to life. Maeve Callahan. Report to administration. Her hand froze mid-motion. That had never happened before. Not once. 10 minutes later, she sat across from Brenda Walsh. The office was immaculate. Controlled. Cold. Brenda folded her hands on the desk. There's been a development. Maeve said nothing. Just watched. Waited. An anonymous donor made a contribution this morning. Brenda continued. A significant one. How significant? Brenda slid a document across the desk. Maeve glanced down. Then, her eyes narrowed. Because the number didn't make sense. It wasn't generous. It was strategic. And, Maeve asked. Brenda's expression didn't change. There's a condition. Of course there was. Maeve leaned back slightly. Let me guess. It involves me. A pause. Then, yes. Silence settled between them. Heavy. Calculated. The donor has requested private medical retention, Brenda said carefully. Round-the-clock availability. Maeve didn't even look at the contract again. No. Flat. Immediate. Final. Brenda exhaled slowly. I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly. Maeve cut in. I'm not for hire. Another pause. Longer this time. Because now, the tone had changed. Brenda removed her glasses. Set them down. And for the first time, there was something almost sympathetic in her voice. This isn't optional. Maeve's gaze sharpened. Everything is optional. Brenda shook her head slightly. No. Not when your student debt disappears overnight. Maeve went still. Not when your financial records are already in their possession. The air shifted. Subtle, but absolute. Because now, this wasn't an offer. It was leverage. They know everything. Brenda continued quietly. Your loans. Your expenses. Your life. Maeve didn't react. Didn't blink. But something behind her eyes changed. Cold. Focused. Because she understood exactly what this was. Not generosity. Not opportunity. Control. And somewhere, very far away, a man who didn't believe in coincidence had just made his move. Declan O'Rourke hadn't forgotten her. He had rewritten her world. And this was just the beginning. The elevator doors opened without a sound. Maeve stepped out alone. No hesitation. No second-guessing. The penthouse stretched out before her. Glass, steel, and quiet wealth that didn't need to prove itself. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like it belonged to whoever stood here. She wasn't impressed. She walked forward. Declan was already waiting. Not sitting. Not distracted. Standing near the windows, one hand in his pocket, the other resting loosely at his side like he had nowhere else to be. Like this moment had always been scheduled. "You came," he said. Maeve didn't slow. "You made sure I didn't have a choice." Her voice echoed slightly in the open space. Controlled. Sharp. Declan turned to face her fully. No visible injury. No weakness. The man she stitched together was gone. This was something else entirely. "You could have refused," he said. Maeve stopped a few feet away. Close enough to be heard. Not close enough to be controlled. "No," she replied. "You removed that option." A beat. Then, she stepped closer, closing the distance herself. "You accessed my financial records," she continued, her voice dropping. "You interfered with my employer. You inserted yourself into my life like you had the right." Declan watched her carefully. No interruption. No denial. Because there wasn't one. "I solved your problems," he said simply. Maeve let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "You created them." That landed. Not loudly, but precisely. Declan's gaze hardened slightly, something darker surfacing beneath the calm. "You were drowning," he said. "I gave you a way out. You gave me a leash." Silence. Sharp. Immediate. Because she didn't flinch when she said it. Didn't soften it. Didn't care how it sounded. Declan stepped forward. Now they were close. Too close. The space between them charged with something volatile. Control pushing against resistance. "You're still here," he said quietly. Maeve met his gaze without hesitation. "Not because of you." "Then why?" A pause. Not uncertainty. Decision. "Because I don't walk away from people who think they can control me." That was the first crack. Not in him. In the situation. Because this wasn't going how it was supposed to. He was supposed to dominate this conversation. Close it. Define it. Instead, she was matching him. Line for line. Move for move. Declan reached out. Fast. Controlled. His hand closed around her wrist. Not rough. Not gentle. Certain. Maeve didn't pull away. Didn't react. But her eyes. They changed. Cold. Measured. Dangerous. "You're in my world now," he said, voice low. "That comes with rules." Maeve tilted her head slightly. Almost curious. Then, she stepped closer. Into him. Deliberately breaking the distance he created. "And you think I follow rules?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a warning. Declan held her gaze. Didn't release her. Didn't step back. Because neither of them would. And in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't control anymore. This was collision. And neither of them intended to lose. The crack came out of nowhere. Sharp. Violent. Not loud. Just precise enough to split the air in half. Maeve felt it before she processed it. A shift. A fracture. Then, the glass behind Declan exploded. A spiderweb of impact lines burst across the window before it gave way entirely, shattering inward in a storm of razor shards. Declan moved first. Not hesitation. Not thought. Instinct. His grip tightened on Maeve's wrist as he yanked her down hard, pulling her off balance just as a second shot tore through the space where she had been standing. The sound hit a second later. A suppressed crack. Controlled. Professional. Sniper. They hit the floor behind a low concrete divider as glass rained down around them, sharp fragments skidding across polished marble. "Stay down." Declan's voice was different now. Gone was the calm. What remained was command. Pure. Unfiltered. Maeve's pulse spiked, but her mind didn't scatter. It sharpened. She twisted slightly, scanning angles, entry points, reflections in the fractured glass. High angle. Long distance. "Rooftop," she said immediately. "Opposite block. Southeast." Declan didn't question it. Didn't need to. "Connor," he snapped. The door behind them burst open. Connor Flynn moved in fast, weapon already drawn, posture low, eyes tracking the broken window. "Sniper confirmed," he said. "Multiple angles possible. Not random," Maeve added. Both men looked at her. She was already moving, crawling toward the edge of the divider, ignoring the glass cutting into her palms. "2 shots," she continued. "First was range finding. Second was correction." Her voice was steady, clinical, like she was back in the ER. Only this time, she wasn't saving a patient. She was surviving a kill zone. Declan watched her for half a second longer than necessary. Because this wasn't normal. Not fear. Not panic. Analysis. "Whoever this is," she said, glancing back at him. "They knew you'd be here." A third shot cracked through the room. Closer. Lower. Adjusting. Connor fired back instantly. 3 controlled rounds toward the opposite building. Suppressive. Not effective. They're walking it in, he muttered. Declan's jaw tightened. Move, he ordered. He grabbed Maeve again, this time not controlling. Protecting. Pulling her low as they shifted away from the exposed line of fire. Glass crunched beneath them. Another shot. Closer. Maeve felt it now. Not fear. Clarity. Because this wasn't just an attack. It was targeted. Calculated. Personal. They're not just trying to kill you, she said. Declan looked at her. And for the first time, there was a question in his eyes. Then what? Maeve held his gaze. Cold. Certain. They're testing your vulnerability. A beat. Then. Quieter. And right now, that's me. The realization landed hard. Because she wasn't just caught in his world anymore. She had become part of the equation. And somewhere out there, someone had already adjusted their aim. The gunfire stopped. Not because the threat was gone, but because it had shifted. Silence flooded the penthouse, broken only by the distant echo of sirens and the soft crackle of settling glass. Connor stayed near the window, scanning, weapon still raised. Declan didn't move. His focus was locked on Maeve. Because something wasn't adding up. Not the way she moved. Not the way she thought. Not the way she didn't break. You identified the shooter's position in seconds, he said quietly. You tracked the adjustment pattern. Maeve didn't answer. She stood slowly, brushing glass from her hands like it didn't matter. People panic in situations like that, Declan continued. They freeze. They hide. A step closer. You analyzed. Still no response. Connor glanced back, tension flickering across his face. He saw it too. Declan's voice dropped. Who are you? That was the moment. The shift. The fracture in the illusion she'd been holding together. Maeve exhaled once. Slow. Controlled. Then, she looked at him. Not like before. Not neutral. Not detached. This was different. This was deliberate. You really want the answer? She asked. Declan didn't hesitate. Yes. A pause. Then, my name isn't Maeve Callahan. Silence tightened instantly. Connor turned fully now. Attention locked. Because that wasn't a small detail. Maeve's gaze didn't waver. It's Maeve O'Sullivan. The name landed like a gunshot. Declan didn't react outwardly, but something behind his eyes shifted. Because he knew that name. Everyone in his world did. Connor went still. That's not possible, he said under his breath. Maeve ignored him. Her focus stayed on Declan. My father was Thomas O'Sullivan. Another beat. He ran the South Side before your family erased it. There it was. Not just identity. History. Blood. War. Declan's jaw tightened slightly. Not denial. Recognition. Because this wasn't just a coincidence anymore. This was collision. Years in the making. You're supposed to be dead, Connor said. Maeve's lips curved faintly. Not a smile. Something colder. That's what makes it a good cover. Declan studied her in silence. Every detail. Reprocessing everything he thought he knew. The nurse. The calm. The control. It all fit now. Too well. You hid in plain sight, he said. Maeve nodded once. 10 years. A beat. Then she stepped closer. Not submissive. Not cautious. Equal. You didn't bring me into your world, she said quietly. Her voice carried something heavier now. Truth. You dragged me back into it. Silence followed. Heavy. Unavoidable. Because the dynamic had changed. Completely. Declan wasn't looking at a civilian anymore. He was looking at a survivor. A rival bloodline. A weapon. And for the first time, the balance of power didn't lean entirely in his favor. It tilted. And Maeve O'Sullivan was no longer the unknown variable. She was the turning point. The silence didn't break. It settled. Heavier. Sharper. Final. Declan O'Rourke stood across from Maeve O'Sullivan. No longer a nurse. No longer an anomaly. Now something far more dangerous. Equal. Connor shifted slightly, still watching her, recalculating. Everything had changed. And no one in that room could pretend otherwise. 10 years, Declan said quietly. Not disbelief. Assessment. Maeve nodded once. Long enough to disappear. And long enough to learn, he added. Her eyes didn't leave his. I already knew enough. A beat. Then, the faintest sound echoed from the hallway. Footsteps. Not rushed. Not panicked. Measured. Connor reacted instantly, moving toward the entrance, weapon raised. Declan didn't look away from Maeve. More, he asked. Maeve listened. Head tilted slightly. Counting. Spacing. Wait. Then. No, she said. Different. Connor glanced back. How can you tell? Maeve's voice remained calm. They're not trying to hide. The door opened. Slow. Controlled. Patrick Doyle stepped inside. Unarmed. Hands visible. Expression composed. Too composed. Connor's grip tightened. Declan's eyes shifted, finally, toward him. Report. Patrick closed the door behind him. The perimeter's compromised, he said. External breach. Maeve didn't move, but her gaze sharpened. Because something was off. Not the words. The delivery. Too smooth. Too prepared. Declan noticed it too. Of course he did. But he said nothing. Not yet. Patrick took a step forward. Then another. Subtle. Closing distance. Positioning. Maeve's voice cut through the room. Stop. Everyone froze. Connor's weapon lifted a fraction higher. Declan turned his head slightly toward her. Maeve's eyes were locked on Patrick. Not aggressive. Not emotional. Precise. Don't take another step. Patrick smiled faintly. Almost amused. Since when do you give orders? Maeve didn't react. Since I started paying attention. Silence snapped tight. Because now, it was clear. This wasn't suspicion. It was certainty. Declan's gaze darkened. Explain. Maeve didn't look at him. His breathing's wrong, she said. Too controlled. Patrick's smile didn't fade. But it changed. Slightly. His posture shifted when he entered. She continued. Weight forward. Ready to move. Connor adjusted his stance. Now fully locked on Patrick. And he didn't check the room. Maeve finished. He already knows the layout. The air turned lethal. Instantly. Because there was only one reason for that. Declan's voice dropped. Cold. Patrick. A pause. Then, the truth surfaced. Not in words. In movement. Patrick moved first. Fast. Reaching inside his jacket. Connor fired. One shot. Clean. Precise. Patrick dropped hard, crashing to the floor, pain twisting across his face as his weapon skidded out of reach. Silence followed. Heavy. Final. Declan stepped forward slowly, looking down at the man he trusted. Then, at Maeve. And something in his expression shifted again. Not just respect. Not just realization. Something deeper. Because she hadn't just exposed the threat. She had saved him. Maeve met his gaze evenly. No triumph. No hesitation. Just truth. You don't need control, she said quietly. A beat. Then, you need someone who sees what you don't. Declan held her gaze. Long. Unbroken. Then finally, he nodded. Once. And just like that, the war didn't end. It evolved. Because now, he wasn't leading alone. And she wasn't surviving alone. They weren't opponents anymore. They were something far more dangerous. Aligned. And unstoppable. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss a story and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're listening.